TJ Kartes. Little history about myself is I'm from southern Minnesota, so I'm not that far from here. I've known Jennifer for 10 years now. I actually did one of my first cover crop presentations for Jennifer when she's in Brown County. And that was after 2013 preparing the plant, where we learned a lot about covers at a kind of an accelerated rate. So, I grew up in Wood Prairie, Minnesota. I went to the University of Minnesota Waseca, which was a 2-year program at that time. But the nice part about that, when I went there in the late 80s, is that actually in all the soils classes I took, they taught me functionality of soil, not just fertility and chemicals. And Richard Scary, who was our instructor at that time, did a great job of saying, how does soil actually function? How does it actually work? Not just you put fertilizer out there, you put seed out there, here's what it does. So it was really a great beginning because it kind of taught us, we've come from the farm, so we knew how all this worked, but we learned a lot more about how does soil actually function. So I worked at a large feed mill for several years. The nice part about that was I learned how to work with large integrators. We worked through the big hog boom and actually worked through a dairy expansion at one point down around that area. We tried to bring a 3,000 cow dairy in to tie a lot of farmers together to raise a lot of alternative forages, alfalfas, a lot of stuff that would have really benefited our area. But at the time we tried to do it, there was a lot of people didn't want that kind of thing to happen in our area, which is too bad because the long-term economic benefits of that would have been great for our community on corn silage and everything else. I worked with my uncle on the family farm since I could get on the tractor with him. I probably annoyed the living hell out of him, but I was always there. I grew up on one side of the road and they lived on the other side of the road, my uncle and his mom, because my grandpa died when he was fairly young. So my uncle took over the farm at 19. And I always say, I went over on that side of the road and learned all the good stuff, then mom and dad taught me everything else. So it was really a fast lesson. And he changed his operation really quick in the 70s. He went to chisel plowing before anybody else thought it was a thing. We went to Ridgeville in 1987, and everybody said that was crazy. And every time somebody told me he couldn't do something, we worked harder to make it work. And Ridgeville really spawned us into the soil health venture, what we got into. We started chisel plowing back in the 70s because we had these terrible clay hills, and when we over plowed them, they washed. So we chisel plowed. We found out that was the worst thing we did because now we created rain gutters that washed down the hill even faster than what we were doing prior. So we started actually just lately disking those hills, and sometimes we left them alone and planted into them. And everybody told us that wouldn't work, but it started to work. We could start to see this transformation. But then economics always drive the bus. You know, we need to raise more corn, we need to do better jobs, so we couldn't keep doing that. So I sold corn and soybeans since 1996 at Red Moon Dealership. In 2009, I started going to my first cover crop meetings in 2009. And the reason I did is, at home on the farm, we've been ridging for years, and we just kind of hit a plateau. And there were several of us in a ridge-till group down in southern Minnesota saying, we just aren't getting any better. So in 2004, he committed to a major tile project. We tiled all 900 acres he runs. We did 60-foot centers. We figured that was enough at the time. We still weren't reaching the plateau we wanted to reach. We weren't managing our nutrients better. We just weren't seeing the kick. So we started going to cover crop meetings because we heard in the East, they're doing a lot with covers and how it was making strip till work better, no till, ridge till. It's like, okay, well then what are they doing there that we can do? Well, David Brandt was one of the first guys we ran into from Ohio. He's been like a pioneer of this business for a long time. And he started talking about living roots in the ground, using covers in the fall, having them in the spring, planting into them. Well, once again, you go to the banker and try to explain this to him. And he says, oh, no. Oh, don't do any of that. That's weed. That's going to be a problem. So we started going to these meetings in 2009. The first one I went to was down in Des Moines. And it's one of my competitors on the Willamette Valley where I work, the company I work for now. And he basically said, if you're north of 80, I'm not sure if you make it work. If you're north of Highway 20 in Iowa, I doubt you can make it work. And I thought, well, wait a minute. You know, there's guys up in Burley County, North Dakota making this work. There's guys in Canada making it work. Well, what are they doing so special that we aren't doing? So we kept researching it. So then I went to work for Legacy Seeds for a while out of Wisconsin, and they had a guy by the name of Dave Robinson kind of started training us on cover crops. And in 2014, I went to work for Saddle Butte Ag out of Willamette Valley, Oregon. And the reason I did is I wanted a direct line for a cover crop seed to do a better job of selling to the producers and who I was working with. So I went out as a regional representative for them. I cover 5 states. So I cover everywhere in the world they say this won't work, which is where I like to work, because if you can't tell me I can't make something work, I'm going to show you how I can make it work. So once again, I grew up right down here. And the significance of this county is really quite a bit in Minnesota. This is the start of the Straight River. which goes into Cannon, which is a 750,000 acre watershed. You can step over where that starts in Steele County. Down in this part of Steele County is where the Cedar River starts. And that's a 1.5 million acre watershed that goes down to St. Joe's, Missouri, where it dumps into the Mississippi. So all of our water is the headwater of the problem, is what they tell us. Everything we dump in the water ends up in the Gulf. And a few years ago, prior to COVID, because that's how we talk now, is either pre-COVID or post-COVID, what you did in your life. I got to go to the Gulf and sit and look at fishermen who are not doing their jobs anymore because they can't get out past the epoxy zone to fish like they used to because the epoxy zone's getting bigger. Now, Mother Nature created that epoxy zone because she actually runs nitrate and orthophosphates down the Mississippi and sediment on her own. But Mother Nature can heal herself. We add an extra load to it. And the Des Moines Water Works, the only good thing that did for us is it shed a light on that we had a lot of nitrate moving that should not be going where it should be going. The flip side of that coin is like when Jennifer showed economics, why do you want to pay for something you're not using? You pay all that money and you send it to them and they can't fish. It makes no sense, you know, so we got to manage it better. So cover crops, reduced tillage, nutrient management, all teaches us how to raise a profitable crop, which is what I can't stand at these meetings when nobody talks profitability. We all want to hug trees and kiss the ground and chase butterflies around and yeah. Well, my banker requires me to pay my loan every year, damn fool. Paid him for it. But every year he wants his money back. I don't understand why. I thought we had a good relationship with friends. We hang out, but by God, he wants that check every December. If I don't get it by December 2nd, he's calling me. You got that check for me? Yeah. So we got to talk profitability. So how do these things become profitable? That's what we got to talk about. Is how do we implement in this system so you become profitable? Not just do, I mean, it's great doing it for the environment. Don't get me wrong, because it's all about clean water. This whole conversation is about two things: cleaning the soil up and clean water. That's it. That's what the conversations are all about. How is it profitable? How do you make a living doing this? This is the only disclaimer I'll ever give you. And the only reason I say this is because I've gotten chastised in the past because I show certain pieces of machinery and people think I'm selling to those companies. I'm not. I sell for a cover crop company. That's what I do. The stuff I'm going to talk about here is stuff I've seen used in my trade area, or I have people that run these kind of units. I might show a picture of a Gandy box over a Montag. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. They both work great. Salford has a great unit. They all work wonderful. The ones I'm going to show you, the ones we utilize or I've worked with a lot. Same with herbicides. If I talk about a herbicide, it's one I know works because I've seen somebody use it. And in the bottom, it says, I might say something that offends you. It's not my purpose saying this. It's to stimulate you thinking about your conversation. I look around the room and I can use this joke. You know, remember Archie Bunker? Remember the Archie Bunker show? He pretty much said it like it was, right? I made my kids watch it when they were kids. I said, you got to watch because this is the way life should be. You goof up, you get told you goofed up. Not, oh, let's give you a participation medal. I can't find that crap. No, you didn't win. You lost. I'll fix the problem and win next time. So where does all the seed come from? We work with the Willamette Valley in Oregon. The reason I talk about this is 95% of the grass seed for the world is raised in that valley. That's where it comes from. That in northern Minnesota. That's where 90% of the grass seed's raised. For the world. They ship it all over the world. The company I work for is actually right here in this little creases. There's a town called Shed. You like finding the Denmark house here. You know, it's the same thing. It's just out in the middle of nowhere. But we have two cleaning facilities right along Highway 5 here that we operate as a company. The reason I talk about that is we contract raise 90% of our stuff we sell. Either it's contract raised, we raise it on our farm out there. We have a farm that's hooked to this company I work for. It's a 7,000 acre farm with no tills. It's family run and organized. That's why I like working for them. I still work for a family. If I have a problem, I can go to the guy who started it and say, I have a problem, and it gets fixed. So I still like that ability. The reason I put this up here is this is the world I travel, basically. I presented here, and here. Not to brag, but I presented in all these states because of one reason. I really believe in this, and I believe anybody can make this system work in their operation. You just got to tweak it for the area of what you're in. But because I've traveled all these areas, I've heard the same conversation from producers. I'm too far north, I'm too cold, I'm too wet, I don't have time, I'm a row crop farmer, they won't grow. But then there's guys in all these areas of this whole area making it work. So are they just doing it all wrong? Or they just made it work because they figured out how to make it work? Well, I think it's the latter one. I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, doing the farm show, and the guy came up and I said, doing any of the covers? Nope, too far north. I said, really? I live in Minnesota. He goes, we have those 10,000 lakes. I said, explain that to me. I said, I got to understand. Well, the lake effect. I said, you go buy something else. I said, I can't fix that. I mean, if you think our 10,000 lakes make us warmer here, come here the week of Christmas. Come here next week and tell me how damn much them lakes are keeping us warm. Because guess what? We had livestock for years. I don't miss livestock anymore. I sit in the house and my friends are out doing chores going, yep, it's pretty nasty out there right now. I'll just flip the channel. Because it's like, I just not into it anymore. But the other part of this is, where does all this water out of these areas go? This goes into here. But the rest of this all goes to the Gulf. Once again, we're polluting somebody's life down there because of the practices up here that we can change if we want to. The first part of change is you don't have to convince anybody, but anybody in this world. You don't have to convince anybody in this room to change. But the guy you look at in the mirror is the first guy you got to convince, and then convince your wife. Because Jennifer showed that. I do more presentations or sit down at a guy's table or in the shop where I'm talking to him. Back here, mom is doing something. I know I'm selling mom. She's going to be the one that says, yes, let's do this. The guy is in charge, don't get me wrong, but she's listening too because she's a major part of the operation, or the daughter. I deal with more daughters in the ag community now than I deal with sons, because the daughters are more mothering and they believe in this, trying to take care of the planet better, they're not tree huggers, they just believe in trying to make this more profitable. So they don't have to go buy another tractor. Another big piece of tillage equipment is something else that they don't see a need for. My youngest son remembers when we still ridge till, and we're doing some no-till work one day, and he goes, what was that stupid stuff with that cultivator all those years for? Back and forth, back and forth. There was nothing out there. What were we doing? I said, building the ridge. He goes, why? It's still there. He said, I told Anthony, Anthony's my oldest son, what a waste of time. Does Dad just like driving that tractor? Well, I did, but I didn't have to. I should have been doing something else. Once we learned the no-till system, added the third crop, it's made it a lot easier. But we had to get there. So what are we going to look at? We're going to look at different species. We're going to look at what you can plant with these species and talk about timing. So these are the major cover crops that you'll work with: grasses, brassicas, and legumes. Somewhere in there, these things all fit in. Now, grasses. See, this thing just wants to advance. Grasses are the catch-22 of this type of deal, because there's grasses that are considered cereal grains, and there are grasses that are true grasses. So one thing I sell quite a bit of the annual ryegrass. In the early interseeding, I sell a lot of cereal rye, oats and stuff in the fall. Cereal rye and the annual ryegrass, I wish they'd named those two products something completely different, because confusion sets in all the time. I was working at the farm show in Iowa several years ago. A young guy came up to me and says, I planted 80 pounds of rye. Well, that's not bad. I planted 80 pounds of annual ryegrass. I said, you're screwed. I said, you are so much in trouble. He said, why did you do that? I went to my supplier. He opened up his book. I had an NRCS contract. Opened his book up, and the first rye he came to was annual. He didn't keep going. So he sold them annual ryegrass, 80 pounds. Golf courses are seeded at 30 pounds of grass for a golf course on a lawn. This is 80 pounds annual ryegrass, Southern Iowa, highly erodible, can't do tillage. What am I going to do? Well, I don't know. It was a nice fall, nice winter. It was overwintering. It was beautiful. It was lush green. I said, well, you could let it green up in the spring, take off, cut it. You got a neighbor who's got cattle? Yeah, I said, cut it, bale it, get your beans planted. You're going to have a lot of downforce, get the beans planted, roll the trench shut, and spray that thing with the mother-loaded glyphosate 2-3 times. I said, you go to your supplier and ask him if he's going to help with this, because he sold you the wrong. The co-op did stand behind it. They said, yes, this is an error. We made a big, we were wrong. We'll comp you the herbicide on part of it. So he took care of the spraying and got that mess cleaned up. He was going to go try to till it. Can you imagine trying to till that out? First of all, a field cultivator wouldn't run the ground. Second of all, if you'd got it opened up, what a clotted ass mess you'd have had. That poor guy would have, he'd have been done. He'd have been done with that forever. He never would have touched, and he was a younger guy. He'd gone, I won't do this again. So the grasses are really a scary thing to work with, because if you don't know what you're buying, it's buyer beware at that point. And then in the grass side with the annuals, there is annual ryegrass, there's diploid, tetraploid, Italian rye, There's all these different levels of that, and each one is different. So when you're starting to buy this, you really got to know what you're buying. So you got to work with somebody that says, yes, this is what it is. Here's how it's going to act. Here's what it looks like in the fall. Here's what it looks like in the spring. If you don't, then you're going to have problems. Brassicas, the problem with brassicas is they're not created the same. So I usually have somebody stand next to me up here. I usually find somebody in the audience that's way smaller than me. If my wife is here, I make her do it because she's 5'1" and about 90 pounds. And I always tell her I'm good shade in the summer and heat in the winter. And if it gets windy, she hangs on and she blows away. And I stand pretty solid because, once again, I've done that shovel pushing thing. I'm going to use that at the doctor next week. I'm building up so I can push the shovel in the ground better than they'll tell me to knock it off and lose weight. They'll yell at me again. So anyway, I like that one. I'm going to tell them that I need this to help me with my business. We'll see how far that gets me. But the brassica side is they're not created the same. So radishes, everybody wants to use radish at 35,000 seeds per pound. Our kale is 180,000 seeds per pound. Turnips are 200,000 seeds per pound. Winter camelina we're using now is 400,000 seeds per pound. So when you get a couple pounds of something, it's not all equal. So when I put mixes together, or I start adding stuff to mixes, we go through this whole list of what are you trying to accomplish. Now, do I still use a lot of radish? Yes. And I love radish for two reasons. One is it shows you where your compaction levels are. It's the only brassica that actually kinks every time it hits a compaction layer. So you'll have brassicas, a radish will go down 3 inches and hit a kink. What's that 3 inches? Your field cultivator hardpan. You put that in the spring. I usually bring the stuff with me, and I forgot today. I usually bring a cement trowel with the point on it. And so, masons use this to smear and level. And it's the same thing you're running through your soil, and you're putting a nice hard pan at 3 inches. So your roots hit that, go sideways till they find a point through it. Then you go down 9 inches, 8 inches, and you get that deep tuber, and it starts to kink again. That's your ripper point, your fall pan. So you have 2 hard pan layers to bust through. Well, you got to get through those. And if your roots can't get through them, you can't get nutrients, can't get moisture. Way down deep, there's a lot of things that we can tap into. Then the legume side, legumes are really quite a creature. We've tried to make them work many times. Peas are huge, clovers are small. Small seeds hate competition. So you got clovers at 250 to 300,000 seeds per pound. They don't like a lot of competition. They don't like heavy grass mixes in front of them. So we've had to tweak our system on how we can get legumes to work. But we figured out ways to get them into a system and make them work. So let's look at a few different pictures. So this is cereal rye. This is flowing in. Notice these streaks. I think those streaks are. Oh, there we go. I think those streaks are. That was 30 years of ridge till. You think we over-applied nutrients in spots? Think we got enough there to grow a crop for a while? We had another farm just like this, and we had winter wheat on, and we were just really goofy people. So we went out and we actually clipped here and did a yield check, and it was 37 bushel difference in our winter wheat from where the nitrogen was and where the nitrogen wasn't. And then the protein was better. I mean, it all equated out to better. But it shows flowing on. That was at 65 pounds flowing on. Now, we use airplanes in my world. Up here, I know that's not an option. I know the planes are not as easy to use in the smaller fields and the protected areas and the lakes. And I have DNR people call me all the time. So there's turnips growing out here. How did they get here? I said, I suppose they fell out of a plane or maybe a bird ate it and crapped it over here. It's not, I can't control the birds, but it's all my fault that it got somewhere. And I guess a turnip in the woods, if a deer eats it, it dies. And in the field, it's fine. But there's always a conversation about this. You put them turnips there. I said, well, it's free. I won't charge you for them. Well, what if the deer eat them? They eat them on the field. So I don't know. I guess in the woods, they die. But the deer work well. So there's us planting through that cereal rye. This is when the neighbors think you pretty much lost your marbles. They drive by several times. They go to the FSA office and ask if we're going broke. They think I got to figure out how to shut this in. They think we're drinking really heavy again, which we're not. We're just, this is our normal. This is 65 pounds. No-till beans in this. We burn it down with herbicide. It works just fine. The day we planted this, actually, my uncle went to the coffee shop and had breakfast and told all the guys at the table, he said, you worry about my crop so much, I sleep good at night. Why don't you come up and watch me plant today? I should have charged admissions because they went up and down the road 100 times. Couldn't believe we're doing it. This is crazy. It's never going to work. We had the co-op down here spraying. You can see this is corn on this side. It's dying. Corn is fine. Now, the only thing that happened, 2 things happened. Two management things we were not prepared for the first year. One is we had a flush of army worms come out of here. Do you know what army worms do to a corn crop? The hence word army worm is great because they're like an army. They march across that cornfield and it's like Grant through Richmond. Man, it was shit was flying everywhere. So we got it killed. That's one of the few times they said everybody needed to die that day. So we killed the beneficials and the predators because it was killing the corn crop. If we'd have known better here what to do, we could hit an insecticide into this when we planted the beans. We could have put insecticide in here with the Roundup and killed the armyworms. Now we scout our rye to see if we have armyworms. If we do, when they burn it down, we throw some insecticide in. I don't like to use insecticide. I wish we had enough beneficials not to do that, but there's times we can't afford to lose a crop either. Profitability. We got to be profitable. So we kill it. The other thing is, see how high the road is here? You can see how this goes up. At one point of my lifetime, this used to flood over the road when we had heavy rains. We would lose 4 or 5 acres here, 4 or 5 acres on this side, because it all sheds down there naturally. After the full tile project done on this 400-acre piece, we still were losing crop in here. We added this. We have not lost a crop since. Infiltration is the key to soil health. You've got to infiltrate the water. When I was driving up here, and I haven't been up here for quite a number of years, it was probably pre-COVID. I said you got to use a landmark. All the irrigators that have went in coming up here, I came up 56 and up through 47 and up that way, all the irrigators. And I understand there's a lot of high dollar crops raised up here, the seed corn area. But if you infiltrate better, and we have customers in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio that have irrigators, we have customers in Wisconsin with irrigators, and as they add covers and reduce tillage, they don't run the irrigators as much because any water they get goes in the ground. Anything Mother Nature gives them, they get. They're running their irrigators probably 2/3 of the time that they normally used to run them. In Wisconsin, I drive through there's irrigators, and the next section they're tiling. And I said, that's an oxymoron. They're tiling to get rid of the surface water and they're irrigating in this farm. Now, that's the same place that has signs that watch for blowing sand and low flying plains, and because that's the central sands region. But they're tiling ground to get rid of the water, but then they're pumping water back up to water their crop. Their soil isn't working right. Every tiler will tell you the same thing. If your soil's not working right, you can't infiltrate the water like you should. After you tile or go in for a while, then there's a time it stops again because you compact it so solid it goes over the top, into the inlet, down the tile to the stream. You want it to go through the ground to suck up all those nutrients and hold them where you want them. So this is our cereal rye. This is annual rye grass. This is V2, V3 seeding, like Jennifer talked about. This is a very intense, highly managed program with the covers. But we use annual rye. Oh, I don't know how to get this thing to stop doing this. This one actually it's also one I run for something else and I keep trying to run it. So this is annual ryegrass. We use this at 18 pounds interseeded with half a pound of kale, half a pound of turnip, and 3 pounds of red clover. It's a more diverse mix. If I wasn't lazy, my uncle wasn't older than me, we should graze cattle. I have no interest in that at all. I don't want to do that in the fall. This is actually been combined. This is November 17th. This is next spring.
When was the seeding done?
V2, V3 corn. This tall. Yep.
You really have to watch the herbicide.
So Penn State has a really good publication that talks about all the different herbicides. It's better than the Wisconsin one. So if you Google improved soil health, improved cover crop stand, and interseeding corn, it shows an entire chemical list of breaks down grasses, brassicas, and legumes, what you can use, what might not hurt it, and what will hurt. And there's herbicides you can use. They'll be just fine to be able to interseed this stuff. We use Status as a post. We use a lot of Verdict for a burn down. We use glyphosate. We use Liberty as burn down because we always have rye growing there prior to seeding this. So we come out of cereal rye.
Is that broadcast or
broadcast? So the reason we can get away with broadcasting is we were ridge tillers to no till, so we have a lot of residue on top of the ground. And around that residue in the morning, there's plenty of moisture. Guys that are just getting into this, starting out, I tell them you need to get it in the ground. Now, spin forwards 8-9 years after we've been doing this, we have to get it in the ground now too. We have such beneficials, they're eating it. Damn fools. I didn't put it out there for them to eat it, put it out there for it to grow. But it's like a smorgasbord. You know, you put me in front of a smorgasbord, you got problems. Unless there's Ludafisk on it, then I'm not eating. But other than that, I'm eating everything. I'm going to town on it. So we can't broadcast anymore like we used to. So we're going to have to build a unit to actually drill it between the rows. So the one unit we're looking at building is at the Don Duos Place units. Then we're going to move them to a unit to be able to use in the fall where we can seed covers in the soybeans and deep place fertilizer next to the row for some of our clients and new customers. So my son's run a custom business in southern Minnesota. I'm kind of lead, but they do all the work because they're young and they like to drive tractor, and I don't want to do it. I do this. So anyways, we're going to build that machine. So we're going to have to start deep placing this back in the ground because broadcasting it, they eat it. We go out and find carcasses of everything. They eat the ryegrass, they eat the radish, they eat the kale, they eat the turnips. They're just hungry because our residue is disappearing so fast. We don't have as much weed pressure anymore, which has been great. So now they're eating our cover crop seed. Well, I'm done with that. I'm not going to feed them. I mean, I'm doing this to raise a cover. I want the cover to work for my cash crop. So this is annual ryegrass. This is May 25th. This is June 2nd. It's dead. You can kill annual ryegrass. As long as you know you bought annual ryegrass, a diploid version of it. Ours overwinters. It's the highest winter hardy score out there. If whoever's going to spray for you between 9 and 3, nothing after 3 o'clock, the next 3 nights, it can't get below 55 degrees, 50 degrees. So that's why in soybeans, like interseeding into corn, going to soybeans, or I have some guys doing it corn on corn. They're doing some delayed planting so they can make sure they can clean it up with the post plan. I got one guy that's actually built a bander unit over his planter. So he's burning down over the top of the row with a high rate of glyphosate early. He gets it cleaned up enough. He gets the corn established. It comes a little bit longer, and then he kills with his post program. So the part I always tell everybody about producers is you guys are super intelligent. You're super intelligent people, and you can work through any obstacle that they're throwing in front of you. So once you understand how to do this and the principles of it, you can make it work in your operation. I know you can, because we're not that intelligent where I live. I mean, I'll be the first one to say, this isn't rocket science. If it was, I wouldn't be doing it. But we figured out how to make this work, working with people that understand it, that trained us. I'm trying to train other people to say this can work well. So annual ryegrass, you go to your agronomist, they'll say, don't ever use annual ryegrass. The problem was years ago, Italian rye came here, was called annual ryegrass. Italian rye is a biennial. It's very waxy. It's used in alfalfa stands. It was used in a lot of forage work. It's terrific, but it's really, really hard to kill in the spring. It's really hard to kill in the spring. The other thing that happened is, in the South, there's a ryegrass that came from Australia that's naturally resistant to glyphosate. Why? I don't know. God made it, not me. But it got sent to the South and used it in their pasture program so it could spray glyphosate to get rid of noxious weeds. Then they harvested it. And I got to present Missouri. I showed you that. And I said, if the South had its way, it'd still rise up and whoop our ass. And I believe that 100%. The Mason-Dixon line is still there. I believe it. They sent that north in cover crop seed. It got in places that it shouldn't have got to, and we could not kill it. Found out after we did the gene pool on it, it came from that base of ryegrass that came from Australia. So as a company, we don't buy any ryegrass out of Australia if we can't produce enough ourselves. If we can't produce enough ourselves, we're done. We do not sell it. There is companies in the valley that bring that stuff in. To me, that's a secret to death. Because that stuff it's naturally glyphosate resistant. You will not kill it. Try tetraploid ryegrasses. Our ryegrasses in the valley, they spray a herbicide on to break the genes. They don't have to tell us what that is. You bring it here, it might be resistant to accent naturally. It could be resistant to another broadleaf or a grass killer naturally. We don't know that. They don't have to put it on the label. So those are things when you're buying ryegrass, you've got to really ask questions about. Cereal rye, not as quite a big issue. The biggest thing with cereal rye is if you're organic or trying to, like Jennifer said, roller crimp, make sure you get the same variety so it matures the same way. We've had guys try to roller crimp and half the field lays down, the other half stands back up because it wasn't far enough along. Roller crimping in our world, I don't know. I don't think it's ever gonna work. It's a great pipe dream. I just don't believe we have the season to get that. If you wanna wait playing your beans till second week of June. But once again, my banker gets all mad when I start talking about this stuff, so I just let it go, because he's all sensitive about money all the time. I don't care. This is, I have a joke about bankers at the end, I'll tell you, because it is pretty funny, and he gets mad every time I tell it. This is Sudan grass. This is teff grass. These are true summer annuals. These get put in a cover crop mixes when they shouldn't be. Now, if you have small grains, if you have really early corn silage, if you have canning acres, this is a terrific cover crop to use, especially the sorghum Sudan or Sudan grasses. They're high mycorrhizal fungi producers. They grow in the summer. They grow in a thimble full of water. We had this up by Little Falls 2 years ago in that drought. We planted Sudan grass peas, Sudan grass cowpeas, kale, and buckwheat, and he took a 4-inch cutting off it with a 1/4 inch ring after rot. This stuff will grow in a thimble full of water. It's growing in the south for a reason. They don't have water. We have water. If it's a really wet year, you don't get the tonnage out of it. But this makes some terrific feed. Teff grass, the reason we did this was in preventative plant year. We had guys that had cattle on a lot of high tonnage, high quality forage. Teff is a terrific grass. If your ground isn't this hard, you'll not make teff work. You literally blow it on top and tamp that stuff in like this. You bury it this deep, it's not going to work. You can get a terrific stand of teff. Patience. It roots for 10 days. So for 10 days, don't call me because you're not going to see anything. And about the 12th day, you see the green fuzz. This stuff, you can cut it on a Monday, cut it Monday afternoon, 14% Tuesday afternoon, he's bailing. The first field we did this one, he called me, he goes, "You're full of crap. I'm not going to get tonnage off this." I said, "Why? I only got X number of bales." They said, "You should weigh one." Took a skid loader out, couldn't lift up the bale. Did 5x6 round. I says, "Don't make that big a bale." He went with his buddy's payloader and picked him up. The bales weighed 4,700 pounds. I said, "How many tons you getting now?" He goes, "I don't want to talk about it." I said, "I don't think so." So I told you this stuff packs really, really, really. It's very thin stem. Any species can eat it, horses, llamas, whatever. It's a terrific protein. It's a really good, but it's a soil health nightmare to make it work because you got to disc the ground, you roll it twice, you make it a brick, you blow it on, you tamp it in with a brilliant. But when you get done, it's got a great fibrous shred that really breaks up compaction, but you create compaction to raise it. I can't get into it. So we talked about brassicas. So these are all different brassicas that are used. So what's this one here? Anybody know what this one is? It's pigweed. It is. It's got. So I mean, the reason we put this in here was Jennifer made a good point. This has got a taproot on it. Mother Nature put this here to armor the ground because we had nothing growing. Now I'd rather have any of these other ones growing versus that one because I know how to kill. This one's pain in the butt. But you look at like the kale, the root system. Here's the radish. Here's African cabbage. Here's mustard. Here's a turnip. So each one of them has this different fibrous rooting system. Each one of these is a different rate. But see these radishes, how highly pushed out of the ground? There's the soil line. He's got a real compaction layer in there yet. And once it hit, it goes out of the ground until it busts through it. These break through it. This caked a little, but it probably got stepped on by a cow because he was grazing this for a little bit too. But these are the fibrous roots I like better than just the radish root. Like I said, this one's 190,000. This is 170,000. This is 200,000 seeds per pound. This is about 30,000. So it's different makeups of each one of them. Each one of them does something different in the soil. So when you put a mix together, what I'll put is like a half a pound of kale and half a pound of African cabbage. And that's close to 300,000 seeds per pound. That's about 6 seeds per square foot. That's a lot of brassica per square foot. You know, so when I do stuff, I talk about square feet, how many seeds per square foot you're going to have, because you don't need a lot to make it work. I'm the craziest seed guy you'll ever see. I'm not going to sell you more. I want to sell you less and cover more acres. So here's the other reason I show this is the radish root. You know, you can see a few fibrous roots. This is the kale root. Now this was in preventative plant, so it had a longer time to grow. But you could get this to work in a small grain or a canning company rotation. You could get this big a root system underneath there, planted up here probably from the end of July to the end of August, middle of August range, somewhere in there. So if you get in earlier, you can get this to work. This is great cattle feed, cattle graze on it. The bad part about the radish is where it sticks out of the ground, if cattle step on it, and they knock it off and it's dead. they can stomp this stuff damn near to death in the plant. So everybody knows about the legumes. This is crimson clover. I don't harp a lot on the legumes because they've been harder for us to establish going forwards. Part of the problem is legumes do not like competition because they're such a small seed. So if you're putting in a big massive mix, the legumes are not as strong. So we've started doing soybeans. We have 2 trial products going in Minnesota and 1 down in Iowa. We did 6 pounds of red, 2 pounds of crimson, half pound of kale, half pound of turnip, or half pound of camelina, winter camelina. We did those 4 in soybeans at leaf drop. Now, the 2 we did, we had to put 10 pounds of oats with them because we needed to fly it and the plane couldn't shut the gate down far enough. The year before we tried to do this, he was supposed to fly 100 acres and he flew 30. We got it on a little thick. Had a hell of a stand, but it was a little thick. And the guy that we did it for says, "Am I paying for all this?" And I said, "Well, look at the stand you got." He said, "I wanted to go over the whole thing." I said, "Well, we worked out a deal with him." But then the next year we bulked it up with 10 pounds of oats. It flew on right. It looks great this fall. Not much moisture. We still had growth. We had another guy that he had a cover crop contract with the NRCS. He put in winter rye, winter trit, and then he put in hairy vetch and he drilled it. He's got a 455 John Deere drill that he moved all the units in between the row, and he just drills between the old row and strip tills over the top of his current row for corn. He drilled that. When he went to strip till, the vetch and the rye and the trit were up beautiful. So I'm thinking that vetch will overwinter for us with the rye and trit. So we're trying to get more species from beans to corn. One of my big scares is we keep doing cereal rye in front of everything. They're already seeing it in Iowa. Allison Robertson has a lot of work out of Iowa State talking about seedling diseases. It doesn't kill the corn, but boy, it sets it back in areas. And they have these areas getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time that they're yielding, but they're not yielding what they should be yielding. So we've said this from day one, we got to do something different from beans to corn. And we need to get more legumes, more brassicas introduced into that system. How we do it is if it's drone application. So I'm working with some drone companies with that low rate mix. I think the drones would actually have a great opportunity to fly that on because it's a low rate. They actually could make that work. So I think in the legume world, if you're going to do something in beans and corn rotation, we got to be able to get it on at leaf drop and coated seed. And if the coated seed doesn't break down this fall and come in the spring, 30, 40 days in the spring is a great benefit for us too. So we got to get that to work for us. And I think we can. If you have corn silage, canyon acres, small grains, you can drill. Then you can use peas, cow peas, 410 4-H peas. You can use Austrian winter peas. They do not overwinter for us. I wish they named things different when they started this stuff because Austrian winter peas do not overwinter for us. Once in a while in southern Minnesota, northern Iowa, we have a heavy oats crop with them. We found some of them, but we don't find the stand that we planted. But if you can get 30, 40, 50 days out of them growth, they'll give you great biomass. There's a lot of nutrients in them on the top. It breaks down really easy. The CNN ratio, like Jennifer talked about, is really low. So we can make those work in Minnesota. We can make legumes work too. We just can't have a lot of grass with them. Because the other part of the grass is it sucks up a lot of nitrogen early stage. And the legumes need nitrogen early stage to take off. And if you take it all away from them, as small as seed is and it's not as viable, it's not going to survive. So I think legumes have its place. We're going to starting out, the grasses are the starting point. The interseeding early is more about advanced program. So how did we start? We started with something we could control. We started flying on cereal rye. We knew we could plan into it. We've been ridge tillers, no tillers. We knew we could plan into it. So we started with that. We learned from our mistakes. We learned about too high rates. We learned about the armyworm issue. We learned how to manage it. We learned how to use slugs. Make sure you close your trench. We plant everything at 2 inches deep. We plant our beans and corn both at 2 inches deep. So we've changed. We've learned a lot of things about that. Termination, if it's wet, we get out and plant because it's wicking up moisture. We know what to go look for now in the field to say, yes, we can plant, not just say, oh, it's too wet. It really, you dig it up and it crumbles apart and it actually carries you better across the field. Our soil is warmer where we have a cover crop growing, there where we have bare soil. We have data loggers to prove all that. We do temperature gun readings. During the summer, when that residue is laying on top of the ground is cooler. So why is cooler in the summer make any difference with soil? Well, if it's cooler in the summer and it doesn't get over 98 degrees, your microbial community is still alive. Anything over 98 or 104, well, 40 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's how Jeff Jurek told me, the cheesemaker comparable. He said that's life begins and ends at 40 degrees. 40 Fahrenheit is where it kicks in the spring. 40 Celsius, which is like 104 degrees, all life dies. Your ground starts to respirate, your crop is evaporating soil. The other thing we did this year was we started doing biomass tests. So we started clipping the top biomass, sending it to a lab that does full biomass tests to show how much nutrients are in that cover crop and what's the CNN ratio. We had rye this tall that had 70 pounds of N in it. It was 13:1 CNN ratio. So right away I said to the gal, we can cut nitrogen. She goes, no, not yet. Here's why. She goes, soil is selfish. She goes, remember that statement, soil is selfish. Soil feeds first, your crop feeds second. If it has a food source, it has carbon and all this biology to break down and work with, it'll keep feeding your crop. When it starts to stress, if it doesn't have it, it'll cannibalize your crop and feed itself. How many times don't you see during a stress time with the clay hills, the sand hills, it burns up right away? Why? The soil shuts down and says, you're on your own. We're done feeding you. Our microbes are here. We're going to live. We live till next year. You're done this fall anyways. They just speed the time frame. So what we've started to see is in these areas, and we've had guys start tracking this themselves, which is something that you can control and mark your fields yourself. We have guys take yield maps, go on farms, define areas that are problem areas, and start looking at what the yield was during stress times. And then as you change your practices, reduce tillage, covers, the whole thing, those areas start to increase. We've seen some of those areas increase. Jennifer showed some numbers. We've showed even higher increases. So 180 that we're working with right now, out of that 80, there's about 30 acres of really good ground, and there's 47 acres of crap. It's low, it's hills, it's sand. One thing in southern Minnesota, the glaciers blessed us with was everything. Literally everything. Rocks, crap, sand, peat. You just give it all to us. We'll take it all. We're a bunch of groups that farm everything. One farm we have has 12 soil types. Over 80 acres, there's 12 soil types out there. So how do you manage a plan for that? Well, you just kind of do everything the best you can. But what we've seen is those problem areas, headlands, low spots in the hills have increased by 30–40% in yield. The good areas have increased maybe half, maybe none. But here's the thing. I'm fine if the good area didn't increase. It was doing its job anyways. It's the poor areas that I was putting all the nutrients, all the fertility, all the herbicide, all the time, and getting 50, 60 bushel corn when it's stressed out. And now I'm getting 130 to 150 bushel corn when it's stressed out. I'm making money. I'm making money. I'm variable placing that stuff anyways, but now I'm making money for my inputs. That shot I showed you down that low spot, we used to drown that 4 or 5 acres out. We put all the inputs there. We got no crop. We get a crop there now. Now, it might not be as high as the other parts of the farm, but it's a crop. So what I think is, the reason I put this is look for markers that you can see. That stuff you can do it all by yourself at night in your shop or at your computer. You can start overlooking at this stuff and start picking these areas, figuring out how to make this work, and then change those areas. Because you're still putting all your money there, but you're getting nothing out of it. In the Cannon, when we did the one watershed, one plan, there's 11,000 acres that's under 65% CPI soil. This should all be diverted. I said, we keep Blacktop and Faribault and Owatonna and everywhere else in the world, we're going to farm those farms someday and raise something on it. So how do we make them profitable? No-till, covers, reduced tillage, third crop rotations, small grains, always having a living cover on the ground as much armored all the time. What is it doing? Plowing carbon in the soil, raising organic matter, holding water, all those things. That's what we're doing. So those are markers you can see in your farm yourself. Network with other producers. I have a whole list of guys that'll talk as much as I talk about this, that love it, passionate about it, making it work. Search out information. Google cover crops. If you Google cover crops presentations in southern Minnesota, stuff I did back in 2013, 14 will still pop up. Me and Brad Hagan, we're both about the same size and color, sells the original Hefty books. People love them. They thought it was kind of fun. I thought it was fun. So you talk about looking for markers in your field. I think they got an erosion problem. Now that's flat. Look how flat that farm is. You know what their thought pattern was here? We'll work it again because they'll fix it. So they went out when it got windy and stripped 30 feet, left 30, stripped 30, left 30. So as the wind blew, it catch itself. And then they got a 4-inch rain and this happened. And then they went out and worked it again. And then they planted sweet corn on it and it was a total disaster. And they said, why did this happen? You know what? I know why. You just work the snot out of this poor stuff. But this is stuff that somebody has to clean up. Townships, municipals, whomever. And this, at the time, was $4,000 soil. Now in my area, farmers sold for $14,000. Now I don't know about you, but 5 ton per acre at $14,000 land evaluation, it doesn't take a genius. My banker should get on that point if he wants to talk about something. Should be talking about how much money am I pissing down the river? Besides nutrients, but soil. How much fertility is in here? We've done fertility studies. We have sampled this in the nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen that are in this. It's gone. You paid for it, it's gone. It's not being used. This had been spread once early in the spring and worked in. And then this is going to be late sweet corn. You can see the weeds coming. And that's what they did with it. You know, and that's flat. Everybody says you don't get erosion on flat ground. This is by Hope, Minnesota. Anything flatter down there, it's flat and light, but this is what you get. So here's on one of our farms. Once again, like I said, this is a low spot. This is actually higher ground here. Look at the water pond and then the neighbors, they're going to lose crop there. I'm going to figure out how to fix it. So we didn't lose crop here. We could have. This used to all fill in at one time. But now with everything we're doing, it doesn't happen. But that does. Here's where, when Trump wanted to build a wall, I said he could have built it here. I'd have managed it for him. Could have just built it from here to here. This runs across on our farm and kills our cover crop. In this man's contract, and he's passed away now, God rest his soul, he had it in there that they had to do full moldboard plowing of corn stalks and children plowing a bean ground, or they couldn't run his farm. And he watched this for 40 years happening and said, this is just natural. I can't control it. So it killed, you know, this isn't even good sandbox sand. This is just junk. Now he's passed away. His daughters are running it. They're letting them reduce. So this hill, this square here, they don't work anymore. At least they don't do that much. The guys who run it are big tillage guys. They still want to do tillage, but they do leave that alone. But I always said if you wanted to build a wall, he could have built it there. I'd have managed it. Okay, so quick, we're getting close to lunch. I'll make this fast. How do you start? Corn to soybeans is a great starting point. Cereal rye works great. Flowing on drilled, you can drill up until Thanksgiving if you want. It'll come up in the spring. You just got to get it in the ground. We vertical till it in. We spread it with fertilizer and work it in. There's a lot of ways to get cereal rye to work. It's easy to make work. You plant beans into it. You get them in the ground. You close the trench and you burn it off the herbicide. And it's a really terrific program. The only caution I'd give is that rye has gotten really tall and you're killing it off. Those beans are coming through. We've seen that stuff lay on top of the beans and create a problem. And it's not that it's really smothering, but it's preventing sunlight. It's preventing them from photosynthesize. And when that happens, you can take bean yield out. We've seen that before. So I tell guys, it's once again, it's management. When should I kill it? When should I leave it? If it's getting dry in the spring, get it killed because it is taking nutrients and water. Get it killed. It's time to die. It's done its job. Time to die. If you do kill it and you haven't planted yet, don't plant for 2 weeks. Because when that stuff gets rangy and viney, it wraps around. I got pictures of starved closing wheels that are wrapped. The guys finally dumped diesel fuel on and burnt the goddamn crap off because they couldn't get it off. That's when you get the call, or I get the call. The crap you sold me did this in my field. That call gets no better from it. There's no light at the end of that tunnel. He's mad, he's got an issue. But it can work well. We've found that out by over the time of doing it, is if you get sprayed, you don't plant unless you get in there the next day. Don't try to get in there too early because once it gets that rangy, kind of half brown look, it really gets rubbery and wraps around. We have Schlegel closing wheels on our planter. They're like finger units. They'll wrap around that stuff like hell won't have it. You can't, and it's a beast getting it out, it really is. Corn silage, if you have corn silage or any early crop, 4 to 5 6-way mix you can do there. just like a no-brainer. It works just wonderful. Now, if you get end of September and October corn size, we're back to the cereal. You know, let's be realistic, we're in Minnesota. We're back to the cereals then at that point. If you're gonna go early cocktails, mixes are great, but how many do you need to plant? You know, once again, I'll tell you, I'm the craziest seed guy. I'm not gonna tell you to plant 30 things. I'm not. I mean, I've seen guys will put 5 brassicas in there. That's redundancy. I mean, 2 brassicas plenty. Kind of a cooler season, a little bit warmer season one. One lives longer, so like our kale will live down to 14 degrees for 20 hours. Flax will live down to 14 degrees for 20 hours. Radish will die at 20 degrees for 20 hours. So you mix it up and use a couple of them. Same with the grasses, same with the cereals. I don't believe in these big, massive cocktail mixes. I think someday maybe we'll have a lot more information on why we want to do them. But for right now, 3 to 4 to 5, maybe up to 8 things is plenty, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. The farther you go, the more you want to get in your mix. Okay, how we apply that? I talked about planes, vertical tills, no-till drills. I've had guys just use normal drills. In bean ground, they got a little down pressure. All you got to do with rock, if you're planting cereal, is get it in the ground and cover it up. Just push a little dirt on top. The German saying for cereal rye is it likes to see the sun and hear the bells. It doesn't like to be buried deep. Now, the farther into the year we go, we do place it deeper. So if we're planting the week before Thanksgiving, we're still planting rye, we're poking that stuff in an inch and a quarter. We want it in the ground. We want it to germinate. We want the ground warm enough to get it up and going. It germinates at 34-degree ground temperature. We want to get it going. We want a tip to come out of it and a root to go down. That's all it has to do. It'll be there in the spring. If it does nothing, it'll be there in the spring. The worst thing is when you get like just barely poking out and a little hair root. That one might freeze off. But we put enough out there, we usually have a great stand anyways. So light drags and rotary holes. We've had guys go out and bulk spread in a soybean ground and rotary hole it in. Just enough to fluff up some residue and throw on top. So once again, I tell everybody, producers are so creative. And the part I love about them, if you go around the backwoods or back shed of most people, unless they cleaned up during the high steel prices, there's all kinds of equipment behind somebody's shed that you can drag out and retrofit and make work. I've had guys drag rotary hose out that haven't been used in 30 years, and they're wheeling across, and now they've got new wheels on them. It's the same bar, but they got new wheels, and it's like, wow, that's we've upgraded that one. But it's showing the plains. Here's what it looks like in the fall growing. This is about a 45, 50 pound stand. See how the ground rolls. The plains, the one thing the plains do have somewhat trouble with is as the ground rolls, they can't go down as far. So we have high clearance machines in our area that run too, that seem to run on these farms better. They can get in and get a little bit below the canopy. Oh, I should have put this earlier. I'm sorry. We're planting the beans, which have been down to, this is the beans growing in the cereal rye. We killed it. Beans are fine. The one thing about no-till beans and covers is this, so they're really ugly till July. They're really, really ugly till July. I always tell everybody, my wife's grandfather, he was actually a bootlegger during the Prohibition time, so he had all these great sayings he learned when he was in jail for bootlegging. He said, ugly at the table, or ugly in the cradle, pretty at the table. So early season, they're just ugly. It's just ugly. It's that brown and the backdrop doesn't look good. The neighbor's black dirt looks so much better, and the beans look better. You get out there, and the beans are as healthy as they can be. They just don't look right. And then about the 4th of July, everything kicks in, and the beans are looking great, and you don't have weeds. This field here that year, I took this picture. We sprayed this burn down. We sprayed the ends and never sprayed the rest of the field. The cereal rye was our herbicide program that year. And everybody's laughing. Beans look to, hey, you got to make chip for yields. Sure. And then they did 62 bushel beans. We only sprayed them once. We no-tilled them. He said, how much did you make on your beans that year? It's not an issue then. High clearance machines. This is about the time we like to start running in the beans, just when we start getting that tint. We want to get it below the canopy so we get the leaves drop down on it, because there's moisture on those leaves in the early part of the day. X number of days to rut and get going. Once it gets going, by then the beans are opening up and we can photosynthesize. We got really cocky and arrogant one year, and we flew the middle of August. And the beans never opened their canopy that year until the middle of September. And we lost thousands of acres of cover crops. And I learned right then, That point, you scout the field. And if the plane is coming and says he's gonna fly no matter what, you tell him, you fly this, it's all on you when it doesn't grow, because the crop is not in the right stage. I tell everybody for aerial seeding or high clearance of corn, you put your foot out, you count to 10. If you don't see light on it for a count of at least 5, don't put the seed. It's not ready. It's not going to photosynthesize. Seeds got to photosynthesize when it comes out of the ground, or it will die under the canopy. We've had it happen hundreds of times. People get mad. I don't blame them. They spent money on something that didn't work. So you got to get photosynthesis. So that's where this rig has been good, because he can control. If he pulls in the field and says it's vined up, in 10 days it's not going to be getting you sunlight. He'll pull out and say, I'll come back. Because it's not like the planes and they come in the air and they're here to fly and we got to fly everything. He'll come back. This is one of the rigs my sons run. It's a Gandy box on a Salford. Very, very low disturbance. We run this thing all the way till November. Seeding covers. A lot of cereal in October. Winter trip, winter rye. So we blow it on the front, scruffs everything in, works out pretty good. We did this. We did a massive cocktail mix of my uncle's wheat and oats. We did a 9-way mix for him. And let's see what that picture is. Oh, so this is one fall. This is a farm we did with that Salford unit. This is cereal rye. There's a little bit of radish coming. We did this one early. It was a couple years ago. The first year we had it, we got them off the second week of September. We blew this on. Great cover in the fall. The radishes died. The rye was there in the spring. The guy no-tilled corn in it was pretty happy. So we drilled late. This is the week before Thanksgiving. This is down by Ellendale, steep hills. We run up and down straight. We drilled that. By the time it froze up that year and was done growing, we had a little spike out of the ground the next spring. What his goal was to hold this hill from even with the no-till and the stalks. It would wash down that hill. In the spring, by the time he planted the beans, the rye was about 12 inches tall, and it held the hill perfect. So it didn't wash away. He didn't lose corn stalks either. The corn stalks didn't wash down. This is another farm we drilled that year. On the left, the right one was we ran the vertical till, and you can see it just poking through in the corn stalks. This was after corn silage. So this was planted, this is drilled, this was 2 bushel of oats, a bushel of rye, and 5 pounds of kale. And there's a reason why he did this at such high rate. He's a feedlot in southwestern Minnesota. He's got 14,000 steers on feed, so he wanted more silage. So he actually took a cutting off this in the fall. This picture was taken 32 days after planting. He waited another 20 days to take the first cutting. He got a decent cutting off it. The thing we found out about spring oats in the fall is if they get snow on them, they go flat and they don't stand back up because there's no lineage in the stalk. So he didn't get as much cutting as he wanted. The next year he got a amazing cutting off the rye. The reason we put the kale in, he had a real phosphorus problem with his county. He was at 397 parts per million in phos. We did this program for 3 years and dropped him down to 125 because we removed the salt, we removed the phosphorus off the farm. He couldn't apply manure on this farm anymore because of his high phosphate. We did this, he can apply manure here again. Now he can't apply every year, but he can go out and apply at least. Because it's close, I mean, it's right next to his building site. He could not apply on that farm because it's right next to his building site. So this helped. We scavenged up that phosphorus and we scavenged up nitrogen. I mean, anytime you have protein, you have nitrogen. So we took nitrogen off the farm too. But you know, he has a way to put it back. But it's what we did with that. But it shows the growth of it after X number of days. This is one of our cocktail mixes. This is that one we did with the Salford. This is about end of October. This is a 6-way mix. That's all you really need. Works out great. We could have grazed this. We could forage this. We just left it alone. Planted into it the next year. Here's a guy by Austin, Tom Cotter. He does a lot of canning crops, so he gets it in early. This is a 12-way mix. He grazes a lot of cattle down there on covers. All summer long, he's grazing cattle. It's what makes his operation profitable because he does not have to bale as much. Now he started baling because it gets so far ahead he can't utilize all of it. He bales it, leaves the bales out there, and then he bale grazes all winter as long as they can stay out on the farm. He bale grazes. So he doesn't want to haul manure out there anymore. He just wants them out there doing their business all over. So he adapted to what he was doing, but we adapted multi-species mixes for him too. This is the spring on our farm by Blooming that had that massive cocktail mix on it. You can see we had a little bit of shield mustard coming back. We burned that off, no-till corn into it, burned it off herbicide. had excellent corn. This area here, from standing, 4 years prior to us starting to run this farm, we'd flood out in the spring and you wouldn't plant it till the first week of June. I was standing in this on the 3rd of May, and it's just as wet a year that year as it was before. We fixed the tile lines that went through here, and we ended up getting the infiltration so that the water goes in just as it does to sit on top of it. This is heavy, heavy blue clay. This is gumbo, snot, rock hard. What guy in North Dakota call it? Monkey crap or something. So it looks like blue monkey crap, and it is tight, tight soil. Okay, so we did this already. So here's my last thoughts. We got to eat. This is why I think we've had the biggest problem making this work. Is the 3 E's and the 1 big F. Number one is the equipment. You know, we started Ridgetown, we had a 7,000 John Deere plant. And we made it work. We put extra springs on it. We cleaned the roll off. We actually had a roll cleaner that we ran so we get the stump out of the way. But we made it work. We figured out how to make it work. And then we got better equipment. And now we have Delta downforce. We have everything. We don't even use our downforce down anymore. We use it to carry the planter because otherwise we bury it so bad. We got precision discs on it. The only thing we maintain for spring is a planter. No field cultivator, no vertical till in the spring. It's all no-till. So that's the only thing. So if we stick 4 or 5 grand every year in that planter, that's the only thing we're putting money into, because that's the most important piece, is that planter. Planter's got to work perfect. Plant the seed perfect, and it works out great. So I think that was the other part, is the equipment. And then how to terminate, how to side dress. We're building more equipment. The experience of what can you do? What do you need to watch for? How do you apply it? When you kill it? Nutrient tie-up, the CNN ratios, all those things we've learned from the experience of doing this. The education, the universities, even the universities now are working hard to start to learn this with us. They're light years behind us, but they will catch up maybe. But they're learning how this all works. But they knew the functionality of soil prior to this. They just weren't teaching it. Now they're actually teaching classes on how does soil function? How does carbon work in this soil? And then the other one is the fear factor. And I say this is guys' biggest holdback is you're scared of ridicule of your banker, your friends, your neighbors. You drink coffee somewhere Saturday morning or beer Saturday afternoon in somebody's shop. You don't want to be the odd man out. But what we learned is being the odd man out was odd man for a while. And now the neighbors come to us and going, how do I make that work now? You want to learn? Yeah, then we'll teach you. We're not going to do it for you. We'll teach you how to make it work so you can do it because you don't have time to hold everybody's hand. But I think the fear factor was huge. You know, nobody wants to get picked on. Nobody wants to lose their farm. I grew up in the 80s. I watched neighbors lose their farms that have been in the family for 100 years. I watched them not farm anymore. So I know what that's like. You guys, you know, age I'm looking around here, you guys did the same thing. You saw the 80s. It was nasty. We had people lose their farms. We don't want to do that. So anytime you bring a new practice or a change, right away it's the fear of how's it going to hurt me pocketbook-wise. We've all heard the nightmares of 120 bushel corn, 30 bushel beans, you know, army worms eating everything. I don't know. Just there's hundreds of stories, bad stories, but there's good press too. But good press doesn't sell. So I think that's a big part of it, why it hasn't worked. There's my contact information. I got cards in the back. Anybody got any questions?